Hi, my name is Diton Wade and welcome back to the channel. So there are several number of you out there who struggle with the fact that you're multi-talented. You can write, you can draw, you can sing, you can teach, you can do all of these things. And oftentimes people will tell you, just pick one. But it almost feels like you're betraying the several other expressions of yourself by picking one, you know. So if you're like me, who's multi-talented, multi-passionate, this video is for you. Let's discuss how to strike a balance. So the first thing is you need to acknowledge the gifts and the danger. You need to acknowledge that being multi-talented is a blessing. It's a beautiful gift. But you also need to realize that when it is unmanaged, it becomes chaotic. So this is the first thing you need to realize, is that there are two sides to the coin, the gifts and the danger. And coming to this realization would help you to deal better with this fact. That leads on to the second point. You need to find out what the core thing is. Say, for instance, someone is a speaker, a designer, and a filmmaker. When you look carefully at these three things, you will see that there is one core thing: storytelling. As a speaker, you tell stories using words. As a designer, you tell stories using graphics or motion graphics. And as a filmmaker, you tell stories using visuals, videos. That is what I mean when I say you need to find out what the core thing is. So for you, it could be creativity, it could be leadership, it could be healing, it could be nature, it could be finance, it could be anything. But you need to find out what that thing is. And when you find out, you will see that you will get to a point where your gifts begin to collaborate. They no longer compete against each other. So the next thing you need to realize is that there is a focus for every season, and you need to embrace this fact. As a farmer, you wouldn't plant all your crops in the same season. You would come to realize that there is a season for every crop. You would plant beans in a season, you would plant corn in a season, you would plant apple in a season. This is also something you need to realize. And what you need to do in that season is to highlight that particular gift and give it the full expression that it deserves. So, as the farmer who has all the skills, you have the talent, you have the gifts, embrace it. Embrace the fact that there is a focus for every single season. So I'll give you an instance that can closely relate to this point. When I first started being very intentional with my relationship with God, there was primary focus on my spiritual growth. But after that season was done, I then moved on to a point where the primary focus was my mental transformation. And after that point, I moved on to another season where the primary focus was my understanding of productivity, value, excellence, diligence, and using the gifts and the skills that I have to become more productive, to offer value to people and get paid for that value. And after that, it moved on to a season where I was now more primarily focused on my physical well-being in terms of the gym, in terms of eating well and doing all of these things. So that is also the same thing when it comes now down to your gifts. You need to realize and pay attention to the facts that there is a focus for every single season. Now, this doesn't mean that because there was a season that was primarily for my spiritual growth, that when I got into the season for mental transformation, that was going to give way and that was going to die. No, that was simply just the foundation. And as I keep going in seasons, that is still the foundation where I still have to focus on prayer, focus on Bible study, focus on fasting, focus on what builds my spiritual growth. And that can be the same thing for you when it comes to your gifts, when it comes to your skills. Right. Now, the final thing is you need to let one expression feed the other. In the second point, I mentioned that you can get to a point where your gifts no longer compete with themselves, but they collaborate. Right? You begin to truly see your gifts as branches of the same tree. One way you can do this is to let one expression feed the other. Remember, I just said that there is a season for every single thing. Say, for instance, the previous season was to highlight your writing, and you move on to a season where it's now to highlight your filmmaking. You would realize that the ability to write now helps your filmmaking potential, and your filmmaking ability truly stand out because the writing is feeding the filmmaking. This is what I mean when I say, let one expression feed the other. So, if you're multi-talented, you have several gifts, several skills, here's how to strike the balance. First, you need to realize that there are two sides to the coin. There is the gifts and there is the danger. Once you've realized that, you need to find the core theme. Find out how all of these gifts connect to themselves. Then you need to get to a point where you embrace the fact that there is a focus for every single season. And then finally, you let one expression feed the other. Okay? So, if you have a friend, a family member, a colleague, you know is multi-talented, but you find them struggling to express all of these gifts and they're stressed, they're burnt out, share this video with them. I'm sure they can learn a thing or two that can help them strike the balance. So until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.